The crowd at Wrigley Field had seen plenty of football before, but never anything like this. Gale Sayers didn't run, he glided. His cuts were poetry, his acceleration pure violence disguised as grace. On muddy fields, he looked untouchable. In the cold wind of Chicago, defenders swore they saw a ghost when they tried to tackle him. He was lightning in cleats. 5 touchdowns one week, six the next. The NFL had never seen anyone like the Kansas Comet, and maybe it never would again. But then came the play that changed everything. A sharp cut, a plant, a twist, and the knee gave out. No contact, no warning, just silence. The kind that tells you a career is over before the whistle even blows. In an instant, the most dazzling runner of his era became a question mark. Trainers rushed out, teammates knelt, and fans in the stand didn't cheer. They prayed. That day, the league lost its most electric player to the very thing that made him special: motion. Gale Sayers wasn't finished yet. He'd fight back, he'd defy the odds, but deep down, everyone knew the truth. The NFL's brightest comet had just begun to burn out. Long before Chicago fell in love with him, Gale Sayers was rewriting record books in Lawrence, Kansas. They called him the Kansas Comet because no one had ever seen speed like his. Not on the plains, not in college football, maybe not anywhere. He wasn't just fast, he was different. His stride was smooth, almost effortless, like his body didn't understand gravity the same way other men did. At the University of Kansas, Sayers was a highlight reel before the term existed. He averaged nearly 7 yards a carry, returned kicks like they were personal challenges, and scored from anywhere on the field, sometimes when he had no business doing so. By the time the 1965 NFL draft rolled around, teams were drooling over his tape. Chicago got him with the fourth overall pick, and from the moment he put on that Bears uniform, it was obvious they drafted something rare. As a rookie, Sayers didn't just impress, he detonated. He scored 22 total touchdowns in 14 games, a record that still stands for a rookie nearly 6 decades later. He had 5 touchdowns in one game against Minnesota and six in another versus San Francisco, slicing through defenders like they were standing still. Opposing players couldn't even explain it. He wasn't human, one defensive back said. You'd think you had him lined up and then he was gone, like he disappeared into thin air. Even George Halas, the gruff old coach who had seen legends come and go, said Sayers was the most beautiful runner he ever witnessed. But behind every spectacular run was a risk. Every plant of that knee carried a cost. And as Sayers' fame exploded across America, fate was quietly waiting in the shadows, ready to test just how fast the Kansas Comet could outrun pain. When Gale Sayers hit the NFL, he didn't just join it, he transformed it. Defenses that once prided themselves on toughness suddenly looked helpless. He wasn't built like Jim Brown, and he didn't run like O.J. Simpson would years later. Sayers was something in between: pure finesse and sudden violence. Every time he touched the ball, Chicago fans held their breath because they knew something unreal might happen. In his rookie season, he didn't just play, he redefined what a running back could be. He racked up 867 rushing yards, 507 receiving yards, and 22 total touchdowns. That included six in one game against the 49ers, a performance so legendary that the footage is still used to define greatness. He glided through puddles, juked defenders into each other, and made Hall of Famers look like amateurs. And he did it all with a smile, as if the game came too easily. But behind the highlight reels was a team struggling to keep up. The Bears were aging. George Halas was nearing the end of his coaching run, and the roster around Sayers couldn't match his firepower. Still, he carried them, sometimes single handedly, dancing through defenses behind a line that couldn't protect him and a system that leaned on his brilliance until it broke. By his third season, he'd already earned 2 rushing titles and was named to 3 straight All Pro teams. He was the fastest player on any field, the smoothest in motion, and the most dangerous man in open space. Gale Sayers wasn't just a football player, he was a phenomenon. But the higher the rise, the sharper the fall. In one cold afternoon in 1968, the same field that had made him immortal would demand a cruel price. One step, one twist, one tear, and the Kansas Comet came crashing back to Earth. It was November 10th, 1968, a cold gray Sunday at Wrigley Field. The kind of day where the wind cuts through the stands and the turf feels like concrete. Gale Sayers had been his usual blur of brilliance that afternoon, carving through defenders with moves that didn't belong to this planet. But on one play, one ordinary, unremarkable play, everything changed. He took a handoff to the right side, planted his left foot to cut back, and the sound that followed wasn't a whistle, it was a snap. A tearing sound that football men recognized instantly. His right knee buckled, twisting unnaturally under his body. No defender even touched him, no big hit, just motion. The same motion that made him great, betraying him. The crowd went silent, teammates waved frantically for trainers. Even the opposing players, hardened men used to pain, stood frozen. The Kansas Comet lay motionless on the cold turf, clutching his leg. The injury was brutal: torn ligament, shredded cartilage, a sentence that in the 1960s meant the end. Sports medicine back then wasn't what it is now. Today, an ACL tear might be a year of rehab. In 1968, it was a career death sentence. George Halas walked onto the field, his face pale. He knew what everyone else did. The most electrifying player in the game had just seen his future vanish in an instant. They carted Sayers off the field as fans rose to their feet, not cheering, but stunned into silence. Some cried, others just stared. The Bears' season didn't end that day, but something much bigger did. And yet, true to form, Sayers refused to quit. While others wrote his eulogy, he started planning a comeback no one believed possible. The same man who made running look effortless was about to take on something he never faced before: learning to walk again. When doctors told Gale Sayers he'd never play again, he didn't argue, he just stared through them. They weren't wrong. By every medical standard of the time, his knee was destroyed: torn ligaments, damaged cartilage, a joint that shouldn't be able to carry weight, much less cut, sprint, and twist the way he played. But Sayers had never lived by limits. If his career was going to end, he wanted to be the one to decide when. Not fate, not doctors, not the headlines. That offseason became a war. Day after day, he attacked his rehab with the same fire he used to attack defenders. It wasn't glamorous. There were no high tech machines, no advanced surgeries, no sports science, just sweat, willpower, and pain. Every step on that repaired knee felt like punishment, every stride a small victory. But he kept going, pushing through setbacks, refusing to accept what the world said was impossible. And by the fall of 1969, the impossible happened. Gale Sayers returned to the field. Slower? Maybe. Hesitant? Never. That season, he rushed for 1,032 yards and earned Comeback Player of the Year, leading the league in rushing again. It was a miracle, but not the kind you read about in fairy tales. It was the kind that bleeds. What made that comeback even more powerful was what happened off the field. During his recovery, Sayers forged a brotherhood with his teammate, fullback Brian Piccolo, a white player in a league still divided by race and silence. When Sayers was down, Piccolo was there. When Piccolo fell ill with cancer soon after, Sayers stood beside him through every painful day. Their bond, later immortalized in the film Brian's Song, showed America something deeper than football. It showed humanity. But even miracles have limits. The knee never fully healed, and pain became his constant opponent. The same leg that carried him to greatness was breaking down again. And this time, no amount of heart could outrun what was coming. By 1970, Gale Sayers was running on borrowed time. Every game began with pain and ended with ice. His right knee, stitched together by determination and outdated medicine, ached with every step. The magic was still there in flashes: the gliding cuts, the burst of acceleration that left defenders gasping. But his body couldn't sustain the brilliance his mind still imagined. Every play felt like a reminder of what had been taken from him. That season, the Bears were rebuilding and the hits came harder. Defenders who once chased shadows now found him trapped in slow motion. The crowd still roared when he touched the ball, still hoped for the old Gale, but the burst, that impossible first step, was gone. Each fall to the turf was heavier, each limp to the sideline more noticeable. The Kansas Comet had defied the odds to return, but the fight was now against time itself. In the summer of 1971, the inevitable came. Another knee injury, this time to his left leg, ended it all. There was no comeback left, no miracle waiting in rehab. The man who had once made the field his personal canvas was forced to retire at just 28 years old. Still young enough to be in his prime, yet too broken to continue. The league had lost its poetry. Fans didn't boo, they mourned, because they understood something rare had just disappeared. Gale Sayers didn't fade away, he was ripped from the game, stolen by the very violence that made football beautiful. In 68 games, he had done what most couldn't do in a decade. He left with 4,956 rushing yards, 39 touchdowns, and a reputation for artistry that numbers could never define. When Sayers walked off that field for the last time, he wasn't limping away from defeat, he was walking into immortality. When the dust settled on Gale Sayers' brief, blazing career, even time seemed reluctant to let him go. He had played less than 5 full seasons, barely 68 games, yet his impact felt eternal. In a sports built on statistics and longevity, Sayers broke the rules of greatness. He didn't need a decade of highlights or a shelf full of records. He needed moments, unforgettable, impossible, breathtaking moments that burned themselves into the game's memory. Coaches called him the most beautiful runner they'd ever seen. Opponents said he was the hardest man to touch, not because he was the strongest, but because he moved like he belonged to a different law of physics. Even the greats who came after, Barry Sanders, Marshall Faulk, LaDainian Tomlinson, studied his runs like scripture. Sayers was the original artist in a league of brawlers. His moves weren't rehearsed, they were instinct, muscle poetry born in chaos. Off the field, his grace only grew. His friendship with Brian Piccolo became a symbol of courage and brotherhood, crossing lines that divided locker rooms and cities. When Piccolo died in 1970s, Sayers accepted the George S. Hallis Award for Courage in his honor, telling the world, "I love Brian Piccolo, and I'd like all of you to love him too." It wasn't just a speech, it was a moment that reminded America what compassion looked like at a time when unity was rare. In 1977, Gale Sayers was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the youngest player ever to receive that honor at just 34 years old. His career was short, but his legend had no expiration date because some players fill stat sheets, others fill decades, but Gale Sayers filled hearts. He taught us that greatness isn't measured in seasons, it's measured in impact. The Kansas Comet didn't fade away. He blazed across the sky so fast that no one had time to forget him. Gale Sayers' story isn't just about football, it's about how beauty and fragility can coexist in the same motion. In a sport built on collisions, he was a dancer. In an era ruled by power, he was elegance personified. And yet, the same grace that made him immortal was the same force that tore him apart. His greatness burned so intensely that it couldn't last long. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Sayers was never meant to play for a decade. Maybe he was sent to show what perfection looks like in motion, even if only for a heartbeat. Every running back who ever broke a tackle with finesse instead of brute owes something to Gale Sayers. Every highlight that makes fans gasp, every return that makes defenders miss air, that's his DNA running through the game. He didn't just carry the ball, he carried the art of football itself. The Kansas Comet's light went out too soon, but his glow never dimmed. Even now, when you watch his clips in grainy black and white, you can still feel the electricity, the blur, the balance, the beauty. Gale Sayers didn't just play the game, he elevated it to poetry. And though time eventually took his body, it could never touch his legend. Because legends don't retire, they echo forever. This is Old School Sundays. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe.